I know that sound. Nope.
Oh, that worked?
Facebook Live. Yeah, I need another one.
Yeah, you can use my camera.
Okay.
That might work.
Yeah, that should work.
Oh, here it is in the windows.
She's small. About to be the smallest.
Did it work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I took, no, Aisha went to, is a sister who wrote a book, Mommy's Keynote.
No, that didn't work. Okay.
No, I just need to put something underneath it. The slides.
My middle child, I'm not going to do nothing.
That's cool. Yep. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, I'm here at Amatullah's Treasures on Lansdowne Avenue in Philadelphia. 6303 Lansdowne Avenue. If you are in the Philadelphia area, come through and take a look at her store. And if you would like to purchase the book, either He Came to Perfect Moral Character or The Revolution of Love, we have the books, both of the books here, inshallah ta'ala. You can come down. I'll be here until 5 p.m. You guys can come down and purchase either book, inshallah. So what I'll do is I'll start with The Revolution of Love. Inshallah, I'll begin reading just a small portion of the book. I'm going to start at chapter number 7, Jealousy, the Green-Eyed Monster. For those of you who purchased the book before that may not have gotten through the entire book, you can read along with me. Just in case, when you're reading somebody else's material, sometimes you may not understand their perspective, may not understand, their view. And sometimes we read things without, understanding the author and where they're coming from. And we just automatically close the book. I had someone tweet last night, very hostile and aggressive, after only hearing a portion of the book or a portion of, what polygyny is all about. You don't necessarily have to agree with it. You don't necessarily have to want to engage in it. Nonetheless, there are people who will continue to be in polygyny and continue to enjoy being in polygyny, both men and women. And there's nothing that we necessarily can do to stop that. You can like it or not like it. It doesn't change the reality. Right? It doesn't change the reality that, you have, these angry, upset women, men can't afford to be in polygyny. That's neither here nor there. They're still going to do it anyway. Like, that does not change the reality of the situation. Your anger and your being upset or being disgruntled with the institution of polygyny is not going to change the fact that it is a part of our religion, and there are people that are going to practice it, whether we like it or we don't like it. That is why the title of the book is The Revolution of Love, meaning you don't have a right to judge where a person finds love. If a person finds love in monogamy, that's cool. We are okay with that. If a person chooses to find love in polygyny, who are we to decide that that's not right for them? I love how we, just superimpose our views on other people. I love that. Like, as human beings, like, how do you have the audacity to tell somebody where they can find love? All right. So this chapter in particular, I had someone, I had taken a screenshot of the first page and I posted it on my Instagram page as well as my Facebook page. And then I had some people comment on it. So I just want to kind of elaborate on it, and I'll select another chapter, inshallah. I just want to read the first 2 pages. So I'm on page 150 of The Revolution of Love. I begin the chapter with a quote from William Shakespeare. He said, "Oh, be aware, my lord, of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster which doeth mock the meat that it feeds on," or the meat it feeds on. All right, so the point here is that he's labeling jealousy as a green-eyed monster. All right, and that's the title of the chapter, Jealousy, the Green-Eyed Monster. So if I had not put the quote of William Shakespeare in there and I just said Jealousy, the Green-Eyed Monster, you wouldn't have known where I got that from and, where my perspective was from. And now I'm going to elaborate in the chapter a little bit about jealousy. There are a ton of women that are in polygyny right now. I mean, just on my way here alone, I'm reading an email that was sent to me this morning. And, you know, I don't know what to say. Unfortunately, many of the Islamic communities, imams, preachers, teachers, they have failed us in such a way, man. Because we have all of these great things in our religion, but it requires a system. Like, you can't just practice Islam individually. There has to be an entire system to govern behavior, govern actions, and govern character, and govern the way that we approach and practice different aspects of our religion. If we are just practicing Islam and there's no governance, right? There's no one there, no system, no institution there to govern, then you're going to have people that are going to run amok. They're going to abuse. And that's what you have today with polygyny. There is no system, right? Even if there is an imam, there's a masjid or whatever the case may be, usually there's this bro code amongst many of the brothers that, when sisters go through certain things, they don't get any help. They don't. And vice versa. Many men, give some of the worst advice. How do you say, well, just divorce her or go marry somebody else? Like, that's horrible advice to give to somebody. All right, you're basically telling them to compound their problems. All right, so continuing, jealousy is invariably a symptom of neurotic insecurity. It's an insecurity. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Jealousy is defined as a fear. All right, so if you're reading along, you can kind of like highlight or you can underline some key phrases, key words, right? Jealousy is defined as a fear and a rage response. Operative terms. You can highlight those terms. It's a rage response and it's a fear that preserves romantic bonds between sexual partners. All right. So it's as a result of there's an insecurity there's an insecurity there, but it is defined as a fear and a romantic bonds between sexual partners, which is why in Islam, if a man does not have jealousy over his spouse, then there's not a real relationship there. There should be some ghira, as it's called in Arabic, some jealousy there. All right? Which is why in Islam, a man that does not have ghira, does not have jealousy for his spouse, is considered a cuckold. Right? He's considered a man who lacks testicular fortitude. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the cuckold will not enter into paradise. Absolutely. So you have some men that I don't care how my wife dressed. I don't care. I'm not trying to control her. And of course, there's a balance with that. Obviously, some men sometimes go overboard and it's due to their own insecurity. But there should be some level of jealousy there, right? And overprotectiveness, because that is what preserves the bond between those two partners. All right. So it is a combination of possessiveness, suspicion, rage, and humiliation. All of that is combined in jealousy. Wallahi, I hope men listen. I hope sisters that are listening, please share this with your husbands. All right, because it wasn't until I did research. It took me 3 years to write this book. Reading book after book, article after article, academic journal after academic journal, taking pieces here from here, just storing information until I had all of it compiled. And then I had to sift through all of the information and put it into chapters and then add ayat, hadith, make the connection between Islam. Obviously, I'm not writing it just specifically from psychologist perspective. I'm Muslim and I lead with that. Right? I'm spiritually centered, which means that religion, my entire life revolves around my religion. Right. And you have some Muslims, psychologists, PhDs who they're not spiritually centered. So when they approach subject matters like this, they approach it from a particular secular perspective. And Islam is not even a factor. I want to be the total opposite. All right. But it is a combination of possessiveness. Right? Suspicion. Many men don't understand why are you being suspicious? Why are you looking through my phone? Why are you asking me all these questions? Right? We get on the defense, not understanding where it's coming from. And we say, oh, you should just get over it. Why are you being so jealous? Like, I'm amazed at a man who says that to his wife. Why are you being so jealous? Like, what else is she going to be? What else is she supposed to be? Right? So it is a combination of possessiveness, suspicion, rage, and humiliation. Neither gender is routinely more jealous, although it is more generally associated with women. Mythbuster, as we tend to think that jealousy is only a quality of women. No, men are jealous as well. Men are jealous as well. Men kill their women out of jealousy. Suspicion, right? There are many women who have been suspiciously accused of cheating on their husbands and cheating on their men, and there was no infidelity involved. So neither gender is routinely more jealous than the other, although it is more generally associated with women. Jealousy, or ghira, is an emotion, and the word typically refers to the negative thoughts and feelings of insecurity, anxiety, and fear of an anticipated loss of something that has great personal value, particularly in the realm of interpersonal connections. So the jealousy could exist between friends, besties, friends, all right, because you are in fear of an anticipated loss. You are afraid that you are going to lose this thing. It's like when the third wheel come around, when the third new friend come around, you get overly jealous. And this happens between men and women. Men and women, that the third person starts to come around. You start to see that this person and this person have more, and it seems like they have more in common than you do with that person. It seems like they vibe with each other a little better than you did with that person. And your fear is that you're going to lose that person's friendship. So that we're getting to the root of where jealousy comes from. All right. So it is, the feelings of insecurity, anxiety, and fear of an anticipated loss of something that has great personal value, particularly in the realm of interpersonal connections. Emotional jealousy was predicted to be 9 times more responsive in females than in males, making women far more violent than men when they experience episodes of jealousy. We're talking about emotional jealousy, right? When you start tapping into, and this is why it's very dangerous for men to try to woo the woman at the very beginning stages, because all of the stuff that you telling her, all of the things you feed in her, we're going to take trips, we're going to make hajj, we're going to make umrah, we're going to live it up, we're going to do this. You know how we talk as men, we talk real big, we talking heavy, right? But the thing is that she's storing all of that information. She compartmentalizes all of that. And then what happens is when she starts to see that you are not coming through on that promise, or even worse, you didn't come through on those promises, and then you marry someone else, and then you do the things with the second person or the third that you promised you was going to do with her. This could make a woman become violent. Absolutely. This could make a woman become extremely violent. And many brothers who have gone into polygyny, unfortunately, have had their share of experiences with that. You've experienced that. Women, this woman is just becomes a completely different person. She becomes violent, towards the other wife, or violent towards me. You don't understand where it's coming from. All right. So emotional jealousy was predicted to be 9 times more responsive in females than in males, making women far more violent than men when they experience episodes of jealousy. Scholar and psychiatrist Sigmund Freud asserted that there were 3 types of jealousy found in sexual relationships. We're talking about relationships between 2 people where there is an intimate relationship. We're not talking about friendships. We're talking about sexual relationships. There are 3 types of jealousy. Number 1, normal jealousy. Highlight that. Because now we need to do an evaluation of ourselves, especially women, to find out where you fall in of these categories. All right. The scholars, they say, ma'rifatul illa nisful ilaj. Understanding your dilemma is half of your solution. Understanding your problem is half of your solution. All right. You can't treat something that you don't know where it's coming from, where the origin of it is coming from. So number 1 is normal jealousy, which is a response to a real threat. All right. Normal jealousy. There's some normality to that the person is afraid of losing someone or losing a relationship with someone. Number 2, abnormal jealousy, which is often described by any one of several adjectives, including morbid, psychotic, pathological, delusional, or anxious jealousy. Right. This is abnormal, meaning you are jealous about something that's not even real. It's not even real, and you are extremely jealous about it. According to some psychologists, abnormal jealousy can be attributed to common issues, including extreme insecurity, And many of us as men, we marry women that are extremely insecure. Extremely insecure. All right. And that insecurity doesn't necessarily have anything to do with us. It's just that's who we marry. That's who, that's who we are entertaining in terms of marrying the person. Extreme insecurity, immaturity, and being a control freak. Sometimes people just want to have control over everything. And then when they feel like they don't have control over it, this is where the jealousy starts to manifest. All right. In some cases, it is due to a mental illness, such as paranoia and schizophrenia, or a chemical imbalance in the brain. Paranoia and schizophrenia can cause delusions of infidelity. What does that mean? So let's break away into a discussion. What does that mean? When you think something is going on and it's really not. Absolutely. You think there's some cheating going on. You think that there's some infidelity going on and it's really not. And this is where you start to look through people's phones. You start to be, skeptical of people. And this could happen even though there was no necessarily a reason for, to be like that.
Yeah, but how does the females, how you have, what do you call it,
some females.
Yeah, how does that closely linked to delusional?
Okay, good question.
It is insecurity.
Good question. He said some women have this intuition, women's intuition. Absolutely. Right. So she has a women's intuition, like she has a hunch that something is going on. And women do. They do. Men think they get away with stuff. Like, you don't get away with anything. She will definitely catch you. You can be swift with your phone, go in the bathroom, use the phone, go, I'm going to make a run to 7-Eleven, go use the phone. Eventually you get caught because when you engage in I want men to understand this. When you engage in a relationship with somebody, you are now inviting another energy into your space. And women can feel that energy. You could have been at a woman's house. You don't have no smell of perfume on you, no kiss. You can walk into your house and your woman will automatically know that you was with another woman because of the energy that you're giving off. Women are very in tune with their emotions. So many women, because you always got this genius that says, not all women, Brother Shadi. Okay, not all women are in tune with their emotions. Many women are in tune with their emotions. So when a person is in tune with the energy that is around them, they pick up on that extra energy. So yeah, that wouldn't necessarily be schizophrenia or paranoia, but there's an intuition there. They're intuitive, absolutely, and they pick up on energy. When a woman is with her man, with her husband or her boyfriend or whatever, and there's another woman who comes around, the woman will automatically know whether that woman is trying to flirt. We like, damn, why are you being all jealous? Like, she just being a waiter. Like, she just, it's like, well, you all smiling and giggling, hee and all up in her face. You know what I mean? Like, because we don't understand. It's like men. We pick up on other male dominant energy. You know what I mean? You know when a man is genuinely catering to you and your wife, whether at a hotel or you're being waited on at a restaurant. And you can tell when a man is genuinely trying to, be nice, and whether a man is, trying to punk you in front of your, we pick up on that. Women may not get it, but we get it. And likewise, vice versa, women, they know that energy. They know it. Assalamu alaikum, brother. All right. So there's this abnormal jealousy, right, is in some cases it is due to a mental illness. And believe it or not, many of us in the Islamic community, we suffer from mental illnesses, man, on levels that are, unprecedented. And it goes untreated because what we do is we use Islam to treat mental illnesses. So we'll draw it up as, I need to get closer to Allah, or I need to start being more religious. I need to get on my deen, or you need to be doing this more. And we'll chalk it up as some type of deficiency in the religion when in fact it is a real mental illness, man. It's a real mental illness. And these things go untreated simply because we just don't feel comfortable with somebody digging into our lives, and actually pinpointing some trauma that we've experienced somewhere along the line. And we don't expose that to our spouses. Many of our relationships are very superficial, so we don't even feel comfortable enough to expose to our spouses some of the things that we've been through in our childhood that has traumatized us, because that's a lot of times where it comes from. You know, both men and women. You know, we've been traumatized, man. We've been exposed to things sometimes, that we still trying to figure out, even in adulthood, man. Such as paranoia, schizophrenia, or chemical imbalance in the brain. Paranoia and schizophrenia can cause delusions of infidelity, causing a jealous reaction. Extreme sensitivity, another one. Some people are just extremely sensitive, right? Everything hurts their feelings. Everything hurts their feelings. The smallest little thing, a man could be joking and her feelings are hurt completely, right? You don't respect me. You don't validate me. You don't value me, right? All of these things. And it's not that. It's just that you're super sensitive. And, everything, hurts your feelings. Extreme sensitivity can also contribute to jealousy in instances where a person perceives a threat to the relationship when there is no real threat to the relationship. There's no real threat. But they're hypersensitive. So they perceive it as a threat when in fact it's not. This is usually associated with the use of excessive control over the other spouse who has unrealistic concerns about their faithfulness, right? Individuals who suffer from abnormal jealousy often exhibit behaviors such as calling their spouse repeatedly to check in, as well as going through their cell phone and personal information. Here again, we use Islam to sugarcoat that, to make it seem like it's not that bad, when in fact, there is a real issue here. If you as a woman have to go through your husband's cell phone, right, then there's a conversation that you guys need to have. I should be able to leave my phone open and walk away. And if you sense that there's something going on, you should be able to come to me and say, hey, listen, can we have a conversation? I'm feeling some type of way about this or this or this. Just be honest with me, and have that conversation. But if you got to sneak and go through a person's phone or whatever the case, that says a lot about you as an individual. But this is what happens, and we use Islam to justify it. You have brothers that will not allow their wives to even go over another sister's house or go to the grocery store, except that they have to check in every single step of the way. And then we'll say, well, that's my right. We'll use Islam to justify that. And there's no justification in Islam for that, man. There's no justification in Islam for that. All right, and then the third is projected jealousy. Very dangerous. And an example of this is that a man would like to see other women, but he can't admit it to himself. So his inner duplicity leads him to suspect his woman and accuse her of doing what he himself dreams of doing. Right? This kind of jealousy can be often directed at rivals who don't even exist. This is what we call gaslighting. Anyone know what that term means? It was actually a play that was written on that. And it's a real psychosis. Anybody knows what gaslighting is? All right. It's like back in the day, they used to use gas lights, right? You turn the gas on and then you light the fire in order to get light, right? So the light is in the attic. So the man tells his wife, go upstairs and turn the light off. She goes upstairs, she turns the light off. He goes around the back, turns the light back on, and then say, I asked you to turn the light off. She said, I did turn the light off. He said, no, the light is still on. Go turn the light off. She goes back upstairs to turn the light off, and then he goes right back around and goes and turns the light back on again. So what is happening here? What is happening here? He's actually the one that is at fault, but he's making her believe that she is the one that is at fault, right? So this is reverse psychology. And this stuff goes on in relationships, man. This stuff goes on. I used to do that. Not necessarily on that level, right? So I'll give you an example. I'm comfortable in my spot, so I can share that. Let me tell you what happens. So you might do something wrong, dead wrong, and your wife comes at you and she's angry and she's upset. And then what you do as a man to deflect is you become what? Even more angry than she is. And you like, dang, what you getting mad for? I'm the one that should be mad. Yeah, but you ain't got to do this and you ain't got to say it like that. And you disrespecting me and blah, 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 in my house. And then you switch the conversation all the way left, right, until you actually find a legitimate argument, right? And then you harp on that to overshadow the argument that she started off correcting you on. You know, it's gaslighting. It's gaslighting. And, you know, as men, especially those of us who are raised by women, right, we learn how to manipulate our way through relationships to avoid confronting the stuff that we know that we have with us. All right. Being raised by a woman is very dangerous because they teach us, you know, subliminally. They teach us, not that any mother is intentionally teaching her son how to do this, but women are very good at that. Women are very good at that. And they may not know that this is what you are teaching your son. You're teaching him how to manipulate emotion to get what you want. And so as men, we grow up doing this in our relationships instead of just stopping for a second and just saying, you know what, this is not cool. You know what I mean? You driving your woman crazy, driving your wife crazy because she knows that you're dead wrong. And you know, but you've found a way to manipulate the argument so it works in your favor. So there's no doubt that a woman in polygyny experiences high levels of jealousy, with some periods being more intense than others. It is a rarity that women in polygyny feel so secure that they no longer experience jealousy on some level. All right. So this idea that a woman should never be jealous, men, we need to get that out of our minds. That's not going to happen. Can we get some juice? We did buy juice.
Sure. I didn't know I was.
Somebody, can we get some juice?
What's that left?
Got you in here working on a Sunday.
And I gotta, it's okay.
All right, so there's no doubt that a woman in polygyny experiences high levels of jealousy, with some periods being more intense than others. It is a rarity that a woman in polygyny, or in monogamy for that matter, would not feel any level of jealousy. They do, however, develop coping mechanisms that help them deal with the situation that can potentially be helpful or harmful. All right. So now let's talk about coping mechanisms, what some people do or women do in situations, because you got to think about it. There's some women who are in polygyny who actually don't want to be in polygyny. They didn't ask for it. They didn't sign up for it. It was what their husbands decided to do. And they don't necessarily want to be divorced from their husband, so they just kind of go along with it. All right. So in being in that situation, there's some coping mechanisms that they have to develop in order to survive in those situations. So one of the more harmful ways of dealing with this green-eyed monster is through what is called emotional disassociation. Highlight that. Operative phrase. Highlight that. Very important. Or another word for it is called numbing. To numb yourself. And the actual term for it is emotional disassociation. All right. This is a conscious decision made by the wife to avoid engaging her husband emotionally, which allows her to maintain boundaries and avoid the undesired impact of her spouse's emotional demands. All right. In general, emotional detachment often arises from psychological trauma, and is a component in many anxiety and stress disorders. The person, while physically present, moves elsewhere in the mind. All right. So while the woman is physically present, she'll cook dinner for you. She'll, have sexual relations with you. It'll be mundane, but, nonetheless, the physical part of it is there. All right. She'll go shopping. She'll do all of the normal things. But for some men who are emotionally connected to their spouse, they can feel that there's a disconnect there. To a man who's just oblivious, that's all he requires of his woman, mundane, random sex here and there when I need it, dinner on the table when I need it, occasional, let's watch a movie together, let's watch the game together. There's some men that's all they require. They're completely emotionally detached from the beginning. But then there's some men who need that emotional engagement, and they can feel that there's something wrong, that this woman has disconnected from me. She's no longer here. Physically, she's here, but mentally, she moves elsewhere in the mind. And to some degree, it is not entirely present, making them appear preoccupied or distracted. All right? Preoccupied or distracted. In other cases, the person may seem fully present, but operate merely intellectually in situations where emotional connection would be more appropriate. Can somebody give me an example of that? Where a person is emotionally detached and they kind of engage their spouse, and it could be a husband or a wife, because men, we emotionally disconnect when we're in another relationship. Absolutely. Either we're cheating, and this is how women pick up on the fact that you're cheating, because the emotion, the energy is not there anymore. She can sense that energy is being put somewhere else. All right? She can sense it. She picks up on it very quickly. Give me a situation where a man or a woman may emotionally disconnect and engage their spouse on an intellectual level in situations where emotion is required. I need you guys to think outside the box. A situation where your spouse may engage you intellectually, and a situation where emotional connection is needed. Death or sickness. Death in the family, sickness. A person is extremely sick, and you find that the spouse is just completely disconnected. Inshallah, you'll get over it. Inshallah, I'll make dua for you. Right? But it's not emotionally engaged. Emotionally engaged would be, right, being there in the hospital with you, knowing exactly what your dilemma is, knowing exactly what the sickness is, being able to communicate with the doctor. You understand what I'm saying? He's there. She's there. But then you find when a person is emotionally disconnected, it's just an intellectual thing. They're just trying to help you walk through it, but they're not in it with you. You follow me? They're not necessarily in it with you. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And the thing about it is that some of us as men, we haven't really been taught how to emotionally connect. So for some of us, we think it's taboo to be emotionally connected to our spouse, for whatever reason.
On their own personal level, like they might have some, I guess, their own mental health issues that, like, coming up, they not have that emotional connection with their own, their.
Okay, so maybe they got their own issues that they're dealing with, so they can't really engage you.
They want to be there, but they really can't.
They want to be there. Okay, that's a legitimate situation. She's saying that what if the person has their own mental issues or their own physical, health issues that they're dealing with, and they don't really have it like that. But you can still sense that there's a genuine concern there, even if you're going through your own issues. When a person is, genuinely connected to another person, you can sense that the genuine concern is there. All right. This may present an extreme difficulty in giving or receiving empathy, and can be related to narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, meaning it's all about you. Like, here I am on my deathbed about to die, and you're asking me about, your shoes, and asking me about where your thobe is, and asking you about, it's a narcissistic personality disorder. Yes. Yeah. This explains why some women in polygyny seem to be very cold or self-centered at times, leaving the husband to wonder, where did the love go? Right? Sometimes as men in polygyny, you I want my rent paid on time. I don't care what type of situation you got worked out with her. I ain't got nothing to do with that. And it just seems like the woman is just very cold. And it's not that she's cold, but she has to emotionally detach, because if she connects to you in the way that she wants to, she's going to hurt herself. So she begins to disassociate. And it comes off very cold. Yeah, women in polygyny can be very cold. They don't care. It's like you got a car in the driveway that works fine. You don't use it. Could you let the co-wife use it to get to work? No. She better go buy her own car. It's like, but you're not even using the car. So what? It's my car. Do not give her my keys. She better walk to work. It's just like, damn. Like, that's your sister in Islam, and we come up with all types of justifications in our mind, man logic, right? Because we don't understand that there is emotion attached to this. It's not purely intellectual. There's emotion attached to this, right? So, we gotta keep all of those things in mind. All right, so this explains why some women in polygyny can seem to be very cold and self-centered at times, leaving the husband to wonder, where did the love go? An example of this can be found in a situation that occurred between two of the Prophet's wives, Aisha and Safiya. So here, I gave you the concept, and now I'm going to give you something from Islam so that you can connect it. Because people are sitting there waiting, like, oh, when are you going to connect this to our deen? I'm hearing all these psychological terms, I'm hearing all of these, scientific terms, but when do we connect this to Islam? Here's the connection. While on this particular journey, Sophia was riding on a camel, which was very slow, having brought many of her belongings, while Aisha was on a faster camel, having brought along a few things. So the Prophet ﷺ, using what I like to call man logic, switched Aisha to the slower camel and Sophia to the faster one, because the previous arrangement had begun to slow up the entire group. So Aisha, who was obviously compromised by her own previous bouts with jealousy about the Prophet ﷺ marrying Sophia. He didn't even want him to marry her. She was already in her feelings about that. And now here it is, this woman is infringing on, here again, something that I believe is specific to me. A threat. Here's the threat. So, she said very sarcastically to the Prophet ﷺ, or she said out loud, she said, "O servants of Allah, look at how this Jewish woman has overtaken the Prophet, the Messenger of Allah." This is what she said out loud in front of everybody. She's like, "Oh believers, look at how this Jewish woman, right, has taken over the Prophet ﷺ. Now she's beginning to influence all his decisions. Look at this." Right, attempting to appeal to her inner logic, right, the Prophet ﷺ explained why he took that particular course of action, and to no avail. The Prophet explained that, you only brought a few things with you. She is on a slow camel, so why don't I put you on a slow camel, and then put her on the fast camel, because she brought a lot of things. That logic doesn't register. When a woman is emotionally compromised, that whole logic thing goes out the window. It doesn't register. We're like, it makes all the sense in the world to us as men because we haven't been compromised. Right. To a woman, it's like, well, she shouldn't have brought all of those things. Well, she should have bought a faster camel. That's not my problem, basically, right? So her jealousy had clearly clouded her ability to see the genuine wisdom of the Prophet ﷺ's decision to switch their riding animals. She further stated, she said, "Don't you claim to be the Messenger of Allah?" Yeah. She's compromised. And some of us might look at our wives and sometimes it's things that they say, the little sharp comments and things that they say, and we're like, you need to fear Allah. Like, this is the Prophet's wife here. It's not a matter of fear Allah at that situation. It's not about, this is the mother of the believers, right? You wouldn't say to Aisha, you need to fear. The Prophet never said to her, you need to fear Allah right here, right? He understood what he was dealing with at that moment, right? So the Prophet smiled. That was his reaction. He just smiled, right? Realizing what was happening to her at that moment, and addressed her by her kunya in an attempt to gain access to that compassionate side, which seemed to have vanished in the face of her jealousy. He said, "Do you have any doubt about that, O Abdullah?" She said, "Aren't you the Messenger of Allah?" He said, "Awafiki shak, ya Abdullah." Do you have any doubt about that, O Abdullah? He didn't call her Aisha. He said, Abdullah. All right. How was that appealing to the softer side of her? How was that appealing to the softer side of her?
Didn't he give her that kunya?
He gave her the kunya because what?
Because she didn't have any.
Because she didn't have any children.
Right.
Right. That's a sensitive. Right. That was a special name that he gave to her. You understand? So giving us as a point as men that sometimes when your wife is going through that jealous bout, that it probably would not be a good idea to engage her head on right there. You might have to take a step back, take one for the home team, and, try to be gentle with her until you can get her to de-escalate a little bit. All right. But meeting her head on, why are you always getting jealous in these situations? Like, you kill me, blah, 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 and you do the same thing. You only exacerbating it worse. You're making the situation worse. And obviously, I'm speaking from a clearly theoretical perspective, because if any one of us was in that situation, it's hard to say what you would do in that situation. But we have in the Prophet ﷺ the best example. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. Indeed, you have in the Messenger of Allah a beautiful example, right? So he said, "Do you have any doubt about that, O Abdullah?" She continued by saying, "Don't you claim to be the Messenger of Allah? If so, why didn't you exercise fairness in this decision of yours?" So her father, Abu Bakr, he overheard her snarling comments to the Prophet ﷺ, and he became very rough with her. And when the Prophet ﷺ said to him, "Relax, Abu Bakr, for indeed the jealous woman cannot tell the difference between the bottom of a valley from the top of it." She's compromised, Relax. Abu Bakr steps in, sees his daughter mouthing off to her husband, and he's about to get rough with her. And the Prophet said, relax. Like, she's jealous. She's having a moment. Right? She's having a moment. Like, she can't tell the difference between the top of the mountain and the bottom of a valley. She can't tell the difference. Meaning she's compromised. And it makes no sense to be rough with her in this moment. It just shows you like the compassion and the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ that we wish as men that we could have just a portion of that, just a share of that, man. Meaning, when a woman is emotionally compromised, it is very challenging for her to apply her normal behavior of compassion and empathy to a situation. In a marriage, a woman may emotionally detach herself from her husband to avoid the pain and discomfort associated with the fact that he has an emotional connection to another woman. All right? It's not about the man marrying another woman, but wife, it's hard for her to watch you love somebody else. And that could be challenging for anybody. And for a man to say, you need to just get over this. This is part of our deen. You're using logic to get her to understand your perspective. That's not going to change her emotional state. That's not going to make her say, oh, well, it's part of our deen. Allah legislated it. I'm just going to accept it. I just accept it. It's all good. That's the way we function as men. Women don't function like that. And we'll make it seem like we'll flip it even worse, to add fuel to the fire. We'll say to women sometimes, so you got a problem with polygyny. You got a problem with Allah. It's like, how do I got a problem with Allah? Where'd you get that from? I got a problem with your decision to put me in polygyny, which I did not sign up for. I have no problem with polygyny. I have no problem with God. That's not my issue. But here again, gaslighting. You see how that works? Gaslit right there. You got an issue with polygyny. Your issue is with Allah. You need to go pray 2 rak'ah and take it up with Allah. You just got gaslit. Absolutely. You just got gaslit because what he did was take the focus off of himself and his decision and how that made you feel to kind of escape that and put you in a situation where now you begin to look at yourself as being wrong for feeling like that, right? That's a very dangerous situation to make somebody feel bad for feeling a certain way. People are entitled to their feelings. You may not necessarily agree why they feel the way that they feel, but you can validate the person and say, well, you're entitled to your feelings. I can't take that away from you. You're entitled to that. Even though I don't necessarily agree that, you needed to go down that route. But nonetheless, those are your feelings. I can't take that away from you. But when you try to control someone's feelings, man, that's very dangerous, man. Very dangerous, man. All right. I'll read one more paragraph, inshallah, and then if you have any questions or whatever, we'll pause for a second. And, we're probably not going to get through the whole chapter. But alhamdulillah, I think we've covered, a substantial amount. And for those of the brothers and sisters who bought this book and said that they read it, maybe I need to do more reading like this so that you can kind of follow along so that you can see where my head was when I wrote it.
So my question is, because right now it seems like you're focusing on the, many terms, the first wife syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
What about the feelings of the second wife coming in? Because I think a lot of times when we have discussions about polygyny, we think that the second wife is okay. Like, she don't have no issues or whatever the case may be, when a lot of times second wives have just as many issues, if not more so.
Okay, good question. So that'll pull me to that particular chapter, because there's actually a chapter in here called Second Wife Syndrome. And she's asking that, it seems like, when we're talking about the issues of jealousy and things like that, that it's kind of catering more towards the first wife. All right. And then that when the second wife comes in, or any subsequent wife after that, that she's supposed to automatically just accept that situation because that's what she's marrying into, and she should know what she's getting herself into. So therefore, any feelings of jealousy is like she's not entitled to that. Am I understanding that correctly? Okay. So we'll pick a section in there because I actually deal with that in the chapter of the second wife syndrome. So, in ending, this detachment does not necessarily mean that she avoids being empathetic towards her husband's needs completely. Rather, it simply gives her space to rationally choose whether or not to be overwhelmed or manipulated by such feelings in that moment. Highlight that. Very profound. So, when a woman detaches herself emotionally from a situation, from her marriage, it doesn't mean that she doesn't want to be empathetic towards you. It doesn't mean that she doesn't love you anymore. It doesn't mean that, she doesn't have feelings for you anymore. What it means is that she's giving herself space to rationalize what is happening with her feelings, and protecting herself, and to choose whether or not to allow her feelings to get the best of her or to get the best of her feelings. That's what she's doing when she emotionally detaches. She's giving herself an option to choose. When she's emotionally attached, she doesn't have an option to choose. She just engages, because it's like plugging a cord into a wall. Once the plug is plugged in, the light bulb automatically comes on. The electricity, the current is flowing through. But when you remove the cord, then you have an opportunity to choose whether you want the light on or you don't want it on. All right, that's pretty much what it's saying. So it simply gives her space to rationally choose whether or not to be overwhelmed or manipulated by such feelings in that moment. This is similar to a woman in a domestically abusive situation who emotionally numbs herself as a coping mechanism to deal with the physical pain being imposed on her by her husband. All right, so women in domestically abusive situations do the same thing. All right, they got to stay in that situation. They don't have to, but until they muster up the courage to start making the necessary preparations to exit from that situation, they're in it. However, being in it, they have to cushion themselves. They have to cushion the blows, because domestic abuse is not just physical. It could be emotional. It could be psychological, mental. It could be verbal, right? Verbal abuse. So in order for a woman to survive in that situation, she has to cushion the blows that she's taking. So she numbs herself. She draws it up to, that's just how he talks. That's just who he is. That's just, he ain't going to change. And that's her numbing mechanism, because she knows that the minute she stops thinking like that and engages every comment he makes, she's going to end up being hurt more and more and more. All right. Can you imagine the emotional conflict a woman in polygyny suffers from? She's caught between loving her husband dearly, especially if they were married for a substantial amount of time, with a serious emotional connection between them. So, emotionally disassociating herself from him allows her to soften the blow of discomfort and pain associated with the fact that he is in love with another woman. In addition to this, she also has to disassociate emotionally to ensure that her jealousy doesn't get the best of her, whereby she exposes her vulnerability to the other wife, the enemy. That's even more dangerous, because once the second wife or the third wife or whatever wife sees, oh, you vulnerable? Got you. She gonna play with you all day long. She is going to play with your emotions all day long. You understand? So the woman emotionally detaches to protect herself from her jealousy getting the best of her in that moment and disrupting the relationship between her and her husband, or exposing her vulnerability to her co-wife and then have her manipulate that, have her take advantage of that. All right? Any questions about? And of course, I put the enemy, not to say that co-wife is the actual enemy, but in many regards, that's the way the shaitan plays them against each other.
Is the numbing unhealthy?
Is the numbing unhealthy? It depends. It depends. The thing is that when children are involved, the children can pick up on that energy. The children can pick up on the disassociation, right? That you've completely disconnected yourself from your husband. The children can pick up on that, so, you have to be careful not to allow the numbing to manifest in a way where the children begin to pick up on it and sense that maybe you don't love them, or maybe, something is going on with you, or whatever the case may be. But I wouldn't say numbing yourself or disassociating yourself is necessarily bad. It's a coping mechanism. It's what you have to do to cope with your situation. And every woman doesn't necessarily have to do that. I think that some couples in polygyny, they go through their bouts with these things, and then they learn how to manage as time goes on. They learn how to navigate. So let's look at chapter number 10, Second Wife Syndrome, SWS. 187. 187. Page 187. This particular condition is specific to any woman who comes into the marriage subsequent to the first wife. So when I say second wife syndrome, I mean second wife, third wife, or fourth wife. Any woman that comes in after the first wife. All right? Be it the second, third, or fourth woman who oftentimes come with expectations that are unreasonable. What do I mean by that? That the second wife comes into this family, or the third wife or the fourth wife come in with expectations that are unreasonable. What do I mean by that?
She's taking over.
Oh, okay. So she's going to come in and she's taking over, right? All I got to do is get the first wife out of the way. That's an easy thing. I'll just get him to divorce her. Or get him to see her. Here again, exposing that jealousy and getting him to see she's always jealous. See, she's always doing this and she's always doing that, right? And then once the husband gets on team second wife, right? Then it's a wrap from there because he's compromised, right? Right. So
coming in thinking that everyone's going to be on one accord.
There you go. She comes in thinking that everybody's going to be happy, loving, right? We read these books about somebody coughing back there. She come in thinking that it's going to be just happy, one big happy family, right? Not leaving room that maybe this person's not going to like you, right? It's like, is that possible? Yes, it is possible. We're human beings. Just because we're Muslim doesn't mean that I have to like you. I have to love you for the sake of Allah, but I don't have to like you, right? That's an option for me. That's an option. I have a right to choose to like you or not like you. I have to love you for the sake of Allah. That doesn't go anywhere. That means that I'm not going to violate the rights that Allah has given you. That's what it means to love a person for the sake of Allah. That the rights that Allah has given you in the religion, they are sacred. And I don't transgress against that. I don't violate that. But liking you and being cool with you and, that's optional for me. I don't have to, right? MashaAllah, Diva in the building. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. MashaAllah, Diva in the building. All right. So the second wife comes in, or third wife or fourth wife come in, sometimes with some unrealistic expectations. And these expectations sometimes can be based on, maybe maybe her mom was in polygyny. And so maybe she comes in thinking that she's going to have the same situation that her mother had. Or she has a bestie, a best friend that's in polygyny, and their situation is working out one way, and she goes into her relationship thinking that she's going to have the same situation, not realizing every situation is different.
But should we really be concerned with what's going on in another household?
Yes, you should. Why? Because that's going to affect you. She said, should you really be concerned with what is going on in someone else's household? Absolutely. For example, if him and his first wife are, bumping heads and, there's a rocky and then he comes to marry you, right? You don't think that's going to affect you? How does that affect you? Because when they get cool again, he don't really need you no more. And that starts to manifest in the way that he deals with you. See, at the beginning, he showed you mad love. In the beginning, he was all in. It's me and you. That's because him and his first wife was going through something. Once they repair that, which they will because the first wife perceives you as a threat. So she's going to hurry up and repair that, right? Even if it's even if it's just on the outside, she's going to repair that. Then he doesn't really need you anymore. So now that starts to manifest in the way that it's like, you used to engage me like this, or you used to be like, it's like every time you and your first wife or you and your second wife get y'all stuff together, then it's back to treating me like this or treating me like that. You understand? So yes, what goes on in somebody else's household does affect you. And you should be, not that you're, being nosy trying to find out what's going on, but when there's conflict, you do want to be aware of that so that you can protect yourself, you can cushion yourself, and so that he doesn't run to you for comfort. All right, because men, we tend to do that a lot. When we are in in a situation somewhere else, we know where to run for the comfort, and then when we get the comfort that we need, then it's like we don't really need that situation no more. It's very dangerous. All right, so the second wife syndrome, this condition is particular to or specific to any woman who comes into the marriage subsequent to the first wife, be it the second, the third, or the fourth woman, who oftentimes come with expectations that are unreasonable. In essence, her position as a second wife is a byproduct of the expectations that have been shaped largely by the cultural implications of polygyny and projected on anyone who steps into those shoes. Meaning, when a woman decides to go into polygyny, usually her thought process about polygyny is usually shaped by her cultural environment. And in the Islamic community, amongst African American Muslims, how has women's thoughts about polygyny been shaped? Let's have this conversation. Because this negative home wrecker. Yes, go ahead, preach. How? Only you guys know. I know a little bit because my ears to the ground, but I would like to hear from you guys. How has the mentality of women, African American women in our communities, we're talking about predominantly New Jersey, New York, and Philadelphia. This is pretty much our tri-state environment.
Me and her have been in polygyny for 12 years. In the beginning, our fitna was not us. It was the outside. Some people hate polygyny so much that they hated us being in polygyny. Mm-hmm. So we would be good, and then we get run over people, and they will manipulate the situation.
Wow.
But it wasn't us. It wasn't us and him. We never had, alhamdulillah, we never had a problem that involved me, her, and him. It was always me and her, and usually an outside person.
An outside person.
Never
so,
me, her, and him.
Yes. Yes, somebody said that the second wife can't find a man herself, so she settled.
Oh,
right.
God.
Oh, no, let's throw it all out on the table. Yeah, man. It's so sickening. It's so bad that sometimes a woman marries into polygyny as a second or third or fourth wife, and her entire circle changes on her.
Sure.
You stupid for doing that. You smarter than this. Why would you do that to yourself? All of these things. And if the woman is impressionable, she's affected by these type of thoughts. That begins to manifest in how she deals with, as she said, that they've been in polygyny for 12 years. And most of the problems that they had at the beginning didn't have anything to do with them too. It was always the outside influences.
Well, what are you doing wrong? Why is he interested in another woman? You must not be doing something right.
Okay, so that's for the first wife, the stigma for the first wife.
It becomes a stigma on both parts. Like, she's a home wrecker, and you ain't doing what she's supposed to be doing.
Right. So it happens even, or she doesn't know her worth. Thank you. You don't know your worth.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I'm marrying into polygyny because I do know my worth. How about that? Why do you get to dictate to me that I don't know my worth? That's why I'm marrying into polygyny. How about I'm marrying into polygyny because I do know my worth? That in a monogamous situation, one man could not handle me alone by himself. I do know my situation. It's sad. It really is, man, how our cultural environment has influenced, in many instances, the second wife is not even cognizant of the fact that her role has already been decided by the expectations of the Islamic community. Your role has already been decided for you. What you're going to do, how you're going to function, how long your marriage is going to last. All of those things have already been decided by the community that you are surrounded by. Her family and the family that she is marrying into until she resolves internally to change her particular narrative. You don't have to accept what everybody else is projecting on you. Oh, that ain't going to last. We'll see how long that lasts. And sometimes women give in to that. And then when the moment you're having marital problems, you run to a person and they say, see, I told you that wasn't going to last. It's like, but you're in monogamy and you have the same problems, if not worse. Just because you have problems in polygyny does not mean that polygyny is not meant to work for you. You would have problems in monogamy. It doesn't matter. Marital issues, marital problems don't care whether you're rich or you're poor. You're in monogamy or polygyny. Marital problems is across the board going to affect everybody. Even the Prophet ﷺ, as we've seen in the example, had his share of marital issues. Absolutely. All right. Her situation is a very challenging one from a number of perspectives, and the demands placed on her by virtue of her role can leave her feeling a bit overwhelmed, especially if this is her first marriage. The second wife literally marries into a ready-made family, oftentimes replete with children, and a predetermined structure of values, which makes the task of acclimating herself to the new marriage even more challenging. What do I mean when I say a ready-made family replete with predetermined structural values? That the second wife marries into a pre-made, a family, right? A ready-made family that is already replete with, structure and their own values. What does that mean?
There's already a family that has do things a certain way.
Right.
A single man, then they will be creating their family together.
Right. That a woman who is marrying into a family is marrying into a family of an institution that has already been set up. All right. Between him and his first wife and their children. They already have a particular structure, how they function. For example, let's say the first wife wears niqab. Or let's say that the first wife doesn't post pictures of herself on the internet. There's already a structure there. All right. And the husband is not cool with that. So then you have the second wife who's marrying into that situation with kind of like a free bird, just kind of just doing her. But now you're marrying into, you're marrying into a situation where there's some structure there. And sometimes you have some women who like, man, freak all that structure stuff. I post pictures of myself on Instagram. Yeah. So what? Sometimes I wear hijab. Sometimes I don't wear hijab. So what? And it's just like what it does is it causes conflict because it puts the husband in a situation where, men here, man logic, what we do, we'll let the second wife get away with certain things because she's new to the marriage. I don't want to come in.
Discussed prior to coming into the marriage, his expectation of her.
Right. Very good.
He's making trouble. He's starting.
Right.
Because he didn't set out the guidelines to the second one.
Good point. She said that the expectation should have been set from the very beginning but sometimes, you know how we do in the Islamic community, we agree right there, agree to disagree, right? We say, yeah, no, I'm not going to post no pictures, inshallah, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. And then after we get in it, we work the system, we work it until it works for us. And then you have the first wife like, well, why is she posting pics? Or why is she doing this and why is she doing that? You told me it was haram and I couldn't do it. And he's like, yeah, but I'm going to handle it, and then she's looking at you side eye like, but you said you was going to handle it, but I still see her doing this or doing that, and then it creates this conflict. So to avoid that a lot of times, yes, you have to state your expectations up front. Listen, in our family, we don't do this, we don't do that. But at the same token, you still, if she's marrying into your family, you still have to be considerate of where she's coming from. Because, you can't just erase her identity completely. So you have to give some leeway. I mean, like, especially if you and your first wife, have been married for a long time and you've been through different phases and stages of your marriage, and you've been married 10, 15 years, and then you marry your second wife and you're expecting her to function like this one, and it took you 15 years to get there. That wouldn't be fair to her either. So there has to be a balance. It has to be a balance, and a second wife coming into that situation, sometimes she's not thinking about all of these things. So the second wife literally marries into a ready-made family, oftentimes replete with children and a predetermined structure of values, which makes the task of acclimating herself to the new marriage even more challenging. On one hand, you have the expectations of the husband, which are the most important of all expectations placed on her, although they tend to be a tad bit idealistic opposed to practical, especially if this is the husband's first time in polygyny. All right, we tend to say, no, you can't come in, you can't do this, you can't do this. And that's idealistic, but it's not practical. Men tend to live in the oblivion of their own impracticality when it comes to their expectations of the second wife, which complicates her process of integrating into the family in a healthy manner. What do I mean by that? That men, we tend to live in the oblivion of our own impracticality when it comes to our expectations of the second wife. What is usually a man's expectation of the second wife?
Cookie cutter of the first one.
Huh?
The cookie cutter of the first one.
The cookie cutter of the first one. Basically, you're supposed to just be a replica of my first wife. You come in, you follow suit. You see what she's doing, you see how she dresses, you see how she acts towards me, and you follow suit. Not realizing that she's a completely different person with a completely different set of, challenges in her own personal life, dresses completely different, likes different things, and we want to basically make them the same. The reason why is because it's easier for us to manage, because we've already figured the first one out, so we can get the second one to act like the first one. Game over. It's a win-win. But what we don't really think about is they might be total opposite, polar opposites, and usually they are. Even if they're not naturally, just by default, that I don't want to be like her. Go ahead. Go for it.
Right.
Any question. I won't deny you. Let me have something else to drink, though.
So, why is it that men tend to have polar opposite wives? I understand that.
She said they want the same thing twice.
This is not, okay. No, like you have one sister, she like all black out.
Right.
And then you have the other, it's like, whoa, okay.
But I ain't doing that, right?
Yeah. But doesn't it send mixed messages to both parties?
I don't think so.
No?
Years ago, I might have thought that. Years ago, I am a proponent of that, and I'm a victim of that as well. Proponent meaning that I was once one of those men who felt like both of my wives, or however many I had at the time, had to all look alike, dress alike, and have the same, attitude towards me and engage me the same exact way. Because that was my own insecurity, because that meant that if they were all different, then I had to step outside of my comfort zone, and I had to engage everybody where they were. You understand what I'm saying? And I didn't want to do that. It was easier for me to just lump everybody in one category, say, y'all all dress like this, y'all all act like this towards me, y'all all cook this type of food for me, y'all all do this for me, and I'm a winner. I get to walk around king, with 4 wives, 3 wives. You understand what I'm saying? And then you realize that the diversity of the women that you marry is actually, at the end of this book, there's actually some do's and don'ts in polygyny. And one of the don'ts is not to force them to be alike, to embrace the diversity of, you might have one wife that wear niqab and another wife who doesn't wear niqab. That's totally their choice. You didn't superimpose that on them. You let them make that choice. And that's something that you learn to respect, right? Without stealing the woman's identity. You don't take that away from her. If 2 people are the same, one of you is irrelevant. The world doesn't need another you, and men have to learn how to accept that. You know what I mean? Men have to learn how to be comfortable that your wives are different. So she said, and this is how some women think. Okay, you walking down the street, you have your 2 wives. One has on niqab and all black, and the other one has on colorful overgarment. You know what I mean? And no niqab. And people are looking at you like, oh, you're sending mixed messages. No, I'm sending the exact message that it is, and that's that I respect the diversity of my wives. I respect that. I don't superimpose my, position. As long as they're covered, they meet the Islamic expectation of covering. That's the only thing I'm concerned with. You are covered. You have on an overgarment. It doesn't have to be black. It doesn't have to be colorful. It's totally your choice. And this is what, as a man, what you're teaching your family in the home. You're teaching them to obey Allah, to fear Allah, not to fear you and obey you. A woman obeying her husband is a byproduct of her obeying Allah. When she obeys Allah, she will naturally obey her husband. In what is ma'ruf, and of course in what is reasonable, what is allowed in the religion, obviously. There are limitations to that, right? So I don't think it sends mixed messages. I think it sends the message that we don't necessarily want to hear or don't want to look at, and that is that women should be entitled to have their own personalities, and we shouldn't shape that and try to influence that from our own insecurity. It's unfair. It's unfair. It took me years to figure that out, but, now that we know better, we do better. All right? So men tend to live in the oblivion of their own impracticality when it comes to the expectations to the second wife, which complicates her process of integrating into his family in a healthy manner. In some instances, he expects that she should just set aside her jealousies and insecurities and simply merge undeservedly into his ready-made family because of the sacrifices he had to make in order for this marriage to be a possibility. Right? All of the sacrifices I made for you to be in this situation, you should just come in and be grateful. Don't say nothing. Just be grateful. Be grateful that you're here. Right? I almost lost my first wife trying to have you. You understand? This is the mentality that we superimpose on the second wife coming in. And she's supposed to come in feeling like, all right, well, I'm just grateful to be here. Like, he can just do whatever he want to do. Give me how many days he want to give me. And, she can talk to me out of the side of her face any type of way she want to because he made so many sacrifices to have me. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Talk about entitlement. Yes.
When you don't want to cut you off, but can you go back to the polar opposites? Not necessarily as it relates to dress, but like personality and even like, hygiene.
Hygiene? That's a little personal.
Well, I mean, oh, come on. We're on like, everybody doesn't maintain the same household.
Right.
Some women, alhamdulillah,
right.
got everything together. And then there's some households that it's like, woo, okay.
Right.
So that can be a polar opposite.
Right.
Personalities can be another polar opposite.
But that one in particular, the man usually doesn't know that until after he marries her. When you go, for example, if you're going to marry a sister and you go over her house, her father's there, obviously she's going to clean the house.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I never had that experience.
Because there's a lot more clean.
I'm going to bow out of that one. Never had that experience, so I don't know. But I'm just saying, generally, that if a woman is going to have a sit down at her house, her dad is going to be here, the brother is being invited over, naturally she's going to clean up and she's going to, make the house look tidy so that when he comes over, he, is given the illusion that this is the household that you're marrying into, right? Lo and behold, after he marries her, it's a whole different story. Dirty clothes on the floor, bathroom is, unkept. It's, those are things that you find out literally afterwards. You know what I mean? Like, I would think. And some men, just kind of accept the fact that this is who you marry. This is what it is, And someone might say, well, you got one wife who keeps the house spotless and you have another wife who, lives like, like a slob. And those are, I don't think that should determine whether or not the man should remain in a situation like that. I mean, some things you can work with, some things you can be patient with. It all depends on what the threshold of the man is. What he's able to tolerate, But in terms of character, being polar opposites in character, that's another plus, I think. When you look at the Prophet's wives, they were totally different people. Aisha was very assertive, very aggressive, in some instances, spoke her piece. She actually ended up becoming a scholar.
I'm sorry.
Ended up becoming a scholar, you know what I mean? And then you had others that were a little more softer, a little, monotone, a little, more gentle and compassionate, like Juwaydiya, the woman with the longest arms. She used to give a lot of sadaqah and charity and, died having much of nothing. So I think that the beauty of polygyny is the diversity in the women that you're married to.
So back to, like, real life, ratchet versus, having some sense.
I don't know. That's a whole different. She's saying that a man who marries a woman who's just completely ratchet, like you married the school teacher. I hope I'm not just throwing darts and hitting the target because I'm not mentioning anybody's situation in particular. I'm just throwing situations out there, right? If the dart sticks, then it is what it is. If the shoe fits, buy an outfit. So you have a man who, for example, marries a woman who's a PhD, has a degree, teacher, whatever the case may be in the educational field, and he marries the nurse, nurse's aide that works at the hospital,
Come back, because this is film.
Okay.
We're talking ratchet.
Tattoos, fake hair,
Just
fighting in a club.
Ratchet.
Yeah, okay, ratchet.
And then, the other wife, she's okay with the ratchetness. Yet, the other one, she has to soft-spoken.
Right.
All.
Fear of law, soft-spoken.
How does the one that isn't ratchet manage that? Like,
You really don't.
yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
She get a pass? You think she
No, it's not about getting a pass. It's like, how are you okay with?
How did you go from this to that?
Yeah, like she just straight
So I want to ask the men, why do men do that? Why do men marry a woman who's, very reserved, very, compassionate, empathetic, educated, whatever the case may be, and then go from that to marrying a second wife who is the total opposite, just, certified, A+ ratchet, in the club, fighting, weaving her hair, tattoos, on her neck, tongue piercing and all that good stuff. How does he go from that to that? How does that happen?
I mean, I look at it like how you have women that are professional, PhDs, doctors, and they marry guys in jail, or they marry people. It's no difference. It's like, guy, if you make $100,000 and your doctor, average, I'm not gonna say the average woman, but she might want to deal with the doctor that's making $100,000. She might want to go to West Philly.
Mm-hmm. West Philly.
I gotta be West Philly.
It might be the flavor. That's like what she.
Right.
That's what they're attracted to.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like if
It's the opposites attract kind of syndrome.
yeah, I mean, if I'm a man and I have a woman with a PhD, she's smart, and utilize her in different ways. But I might want the hood special, like the hood special. Yeah. It's like I might need her to do something. I might need her to do something different.
Right.
So it's like I don't know. It's like it's like two intelligent people. Not to say they can't get along, but it's like a rough. Somebody you might. I know. What I'm talking about.
Right. You might want something a little different. So
right.
He's saying that, and then on top of that, then you have to look at the where he was at that time. At the time, like the times that we are when we meet people, we're in different phases and stages of our lives at that moment. So when I married this one, and she was a smart person, maybe that's where I was at that point in my life. And then later on, I married somebody with a little more spunk, little spice, little sauce, and that's where I was at that particular point in my life. I don't know what that is, but some men go through that. If you're having a midlife crisis, I don't know. At 60, you go buy a Jaguar. I mean, I don't know. You want a 17, 18-year-old, ratchet, weaving her hair, tattoos, and and barely prays. That's the type. You have some brothers. You have some brothers that go that route. You looking like you having a midlife crisis. Like, is everything okay? Like, how you go from that to that? And you can't really explain it. That man has to be able to explain to you why he did that. I don't know.
You get both you want. Like, you get she make good money. Well, not she, but if the person is a good person, you might. If you get both from one, you pretty much won. But chances of getting that is real slim.
Very, very slim. Because one wife is always going to feel like who you marry, the second wife you marry or the third wife you marry, should be a reflection of what we've built. Right? You should have matured past a certain phase. And if we've been married for 10, 15 years and we've built this, type of, marriage, and then you go and you marry someone who is of a lesser status than what we've built, then sometimes women feel like that's a reflection of, her failure, of a reflection of, where they failed in their marriage. I don't, sometimes that could happen, but you're never going to win with those two. The highly educated, intelligent is never going to be cool with the ratchet. That's not going to happen. Right? She's going to actually lose respect for you because she's going to think that through all the things that we've been through, you should have made a better choice than that. That's another thing. Yes. Yeah.
That's a whole nother day.
Yeah, man. That's a classic Shadeed Muhammad. Yeah. I'm gonna save you. I'm gonna fix you up. Absolutely.
Room to substitute what he wants. You know what I mean?
Right, we feel like we can groom her. Like, I can take someone ratchet and I can actually, make her like. So, man might be feeling like, well, if she's educated and she's where she is, she did that with my help. So if I helped her get there, I can go and take somebody else. And until you realize that, when you marry a woman and you bring her into your life, you have more to lose than she does, because you got children at stake. And I mean, of course, she takes a loss as well. But you got your reputation, you got, money that you're shelling out, as a result of that. There's a lot that you stand to lose. So if a man is going to decide to go into polygyny, he has to be very selective about, this is an honor that Allah gave you. You know what I mean? Don't just squander that, by just going and choosing anybody. Like, if you're going to choose to do that, especially if you have a wife that's on board with that, like you got all of your cards lined up, why go and make a ratchet selection when you could choose way better than that? You know what I mean? Like, you know, everything is in your hands, you know? But, you know, good, man, that we're having it. I just wish that we could have this on a larger scale, you know, that, you know, you have so many young people, especially here in Philadelphia, that are in polygyny, that like are lost in the wilderness. They don't know if they're coming or going, you know, and there's a lot at stake. Children are involved, you know, households are involved, other families are involved. And, you know, a lot of times these things, you know, go unaddressed. No, they can't all live together. That's a myth. They don't all live together. Islam, you know, dictates that the man provide each woman with her own space, her own housing. The Prophet ﷺ is the greatest example of that. All right. Husband's guilt syndrome, HGS, is a psychological disorder relative to men who marry into polygyny at the expense of severe shame. Sometimes men, go through periods of shame of marrying into polygyny. Sometimes the shame can be bred by the inopportune timing of the decision to marry the second wife, anytime during or post-pregnancy, death in the family, anniversary, during the iddah period. I mean, you name it. There's so many inopportune times to marry into polygyny. All right. And if a man marries into polygyny in one of those times, he will not be able to fully enjoy his polygynous situation because he did it at a time when he should not have. And he's going to deal with the shame that comes along with that. All right. So this is husband's guilt syndrome. Or it could be the result of marrying another woman after investing so much time in monogamy with the first wife. You have so many men who've been married to their first wife for 20 years. And then they decide, I want to marry a second wife. But then you're looking at your children. You're looking at the house, everything that you've built. And now you're going to go and take a portion of that and invest it into someone else. There's a level of shame and guilt that men experience doing that. So it's not all men are having their cake and they're eating it too. You might see him with multiple wives, but the shame and the guilt that he's experiencing is eating him up. He can't even enjoy his polygynous marriage. All right. And in either case, the husband's guilt and shame causes him to placate the feelings of disappointment and frustration experienced by the first wife. So the first wife feels some type of way that he's marrying another woman. And so he begins to now placate her feelings, letting her get away with certain things, letting her do certain things, taking her certain places because he's trying to escape that feeling of shame and guilt instead of just standing in his discomfort, knowing you're a man. This is the decision that you made. No one is going to be cool with it, whether she's a first wife, second wife, third wife, or fourth wife. No one is going to be cool with that. And just learning how to stand in that discomfort. So, you know, he begins to placate the feelings of the first wife with his decision to marry another. He will usually exercise an unrestricted level of leniency towards her misbehavior. And in some instances, blatant disrespect of the second wife. Right? So in his attempt to placate the feelings of his first wife for marrying a second wife, he lets her kind of get away with murder. Like she disrespects the second wife, talks about her behind her back. He doesn't say anything to her, right? The Prophet ﷺ never tolerated one of his wives talking about the other one behind their back. Never. And any man who does that, if you allow your first wife or second wife to talk about the other one behind their back, then you'll allow the other one to do it too. And women know that. If you sit there and you let her talk about your first wife or let her talk about your second wife in your presence and you don't check that, right? The signal that you're sending is that it's okay for her to do that. And when she thinks about it, she knows that you're going to let the other wife do that to her too, because you let her do it to her. You know, and the Prophet ﷺ, when he was with Aisha and she said, you know, Safiya is short and chubby, the Prophet ﷺ said, if I was to take what you just said about Safiya and I was to mix it with the water in the ocean with 7 other oceans added to it, you would have corrupted all of the water in the ocean. You're wrong. Like, don't say that. He didn't have to say it was haram. That wasn't his usual approach to reprimand and reproach. And that's what I kind of write about in the other book, He Came to Perfect Moral Character. He didn't, his approach to reprimand and reproach was not one of harshness and shidda and, you know, being rigid with people. That wasn't the way. He would use metaphors, and people would just get it. As the scholars, they have a saying, you know, al-labib yakfihi al-ishara, that the intelligent person, all you have to do is indicate. They get it. You don't have to spell it out for them. They usually get it. All right, so in either case, the husband's guilt and shame causes him to placate the feelings of disappointment and frustration experienced by the first wife with his decision to marry another wife. He will usually exercise an unrestricted level of leniency towards her misbehavior and in some instances blatant disrespect of the second wife. This scenario is obviously in reference to those situations where the second wife did not co-conspire with the husband in a series of behaviors that are considered illegal according to Islamic legislation. For in that case, the first wife may be excused for her emotional outbursts and misbehaviors towards the husband and the co-conspiring second wife. What do I mean by that? What I'm saying is that if the first wife is disrespectful towards the second wife because her and her husband were kicking it and going about it in the wrong way, she's justified. And then you have some men that will make their wives accept a situation like that. It's just like, first of all, y'all was sleeping with each other. Y'all done went places together. And then you come to me talking about this is your second wife and I have to just accept that? Absolutely not. Not going to happen. And, you know, as men, we're justifying it. Well, you know, I was going to marry the sister, or we was intended. Intended doesn't mean you can have sex with her. That's not what being intended is all about. Who said that that was okay? That's not what being intended means. But, you know, we take that to mean, you know, a different thing. And then once we decide, okay, you know, you get caught out there. A lot of times you have brothers who get caught out there and then they say, well, I'm going to marry the sister. But you had no intention on marrying her. The only reason why you said you was going to marry her is because you got caught out there. And then you go ahead, you marry her, and then you expect the first wife to just embrace her with open arms, and she's supposed to just be okay with that situation. And it's just like, yo, how am I supposed to look you in your face? You disrespected me by communicating with my husband. You knew he had another wife. You knew he had a wife. And you still chose to communicate with him secretly. You co-conspired with him to, you know, have this relationship. And then when y'all got caught out there, you expect me to just look you in the face and now accept you as my co-wife? No. Unacceptable. So what I'm saying is that some of that, the disrespect and the misbehavior of the first wife, it might be justified. It might be justified, right? A Bedouin came to the Prophet ﷺ. Here's the connection. A Bedouin came to the Prophet ﷺ demanding the payment of a debt owed to him. The Prophet owed him the debt, and the Bedouin came to the Prophet demanding that the Prophet pay him. And he began speaking to the Prophet in a very harsh tone. The companions overheard this conversation, and before they could respond, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Da'hu, leave him, for indeed the one to whom a right is owed is justified for getting angry and using harsh words." The Prophet excused him for even coming, you know, talking to him a certain way, because he said that the person that you owe a debt to, he has every right to get angry and to get upset and to talk to you based upon that being upset. So I'm using that to say that if a man co-conspires with a woman that is not his wife and communicating with her and talking with her, and we're not even talking about a debt, we're talking about infidelity. We're talking about the disruption and disrespect and disregard of the sacred bonds of marriage. And then, you know, the woman is like, the second wife is like, well, how are you going to let your first wife disrespect me like that? You disrespected her. You disrespected her before she ever disrespected you by communicating with her husband in a manner that Islam did not legislate. You follow me? So I'm using that hadith to show that there are instances where we are allowed to get angry and upset and to speak to people in a harsh way. Some people might say, well, you're being un-Islamic, or that behavior is haram, or whatever the case may be. No, the man clearly walked up to the Prophet and started using a tone that the Sahaba considered offensive and injurious. And the Prophet said, no, leave him. He has a right to get angry and say to me what he wants to say. I owe him. Pay him. Leave him. He didn't stop them. So, you know, I'm just using that to show that, you know, sometimes, you know, the behavior of the first wife towards the second wife might be justified, especially if the man went about it in the wrong manner. And you can't say you didn't know that he didn't have a second wife. You can't possibly be that oblivious. Is that possible that a woman could say, well, I didn't know he had a first wife. He strung me along the whole time. I never even knew he had another wife. Come on. You can't possibly be that oblivious. So that's, pretty much, and you can continue along in that chapter. It's not actually a long chapter, but I use some other examples in there of the Prophet ﷺ in there and his wives. At the end of the chapter, I said expectation is the mother of all frustration. Therefore, it is important for the second wife to realize the nuances of polygyny that distinguishes it from monogamy. That you marry into polygyny, this is not monogamy. This is a whole different ball game. All right, and embrace it for what it is. For it would be unfair to her, the husband, and the first wife, and the children involved to treat polygyny like monogamy. Right, and I end it with a quote: "Reality is seeing things the way that they are, not as the way that we would like them to be." All right. So that's the revolution of love, a man's perspective on loving multiple women in a non-traditional marriage. Then the other book, just one small chapter or one page that I would like to read from the. He came to perfect moral character, the persona of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ through my eyes. All right. And as I said before, the reason why I wrote this book in 2009, I just revised it, within the past few months. I've been working on to revise it. So almost 10 years has gone by since I wrote this book. Obviously, I've had a lot of experiences and a lot of, life experiences since then. So I've added some other stuff to it and just kind of made some changes to it. The chapter that I want to read, or the page or two from the chapter that I want to read, is called Chapter 8. Don't over-exaggerate the mistake. Don't make mistakes seem like they're bigger than what they really are. All right, yeah. You can purchase the book online through PayPal. My PayPal account is the same as my email account, imamshadidmuhammad@gmail.com. If you purchase the book through PayPal, inshallah, the book will be sent out to you within a day or two. All right. The Revolution of Love is on Kindle. You can go to Amazon and purchase the Revolution of Love. The other one, He Came to Perfect Moral Character, is not on Amazon yet. It's not on Amazon yet, but the Revolution of Love is on Amazon. You can purchase the book through PayPal. There's no link. Thank you, alhamdulillah. My wife posted the link for the PayPal. You just go to imamshadidmuhammad@gmail on PayPal, transfer the money over to my account, and the book will be sent out to you. I will be shipping out books tomorrow, so if you order a book today, it will be shipped out tomorrow, inshallah. If you order a book today, it will be shipped out tomorrow. If you do not order it today, it will not be shipped out usually on the same day. My schedule doesn't, work like that. When I get a chance to get to the post office and ship everything out at one time, that's usually what I do. All right, so page 150, chapter 8, don't over-exaggerate the mistakes. We always have a tendency to over-exaggerate. I know I do. We make things look bigger than what they really are because we're hoping to get the validation from the situation that we desire. So we make it look bigger than what it really is. Man is inclined to exaggerate almost everything except his own mistakes. That's the quote that I lead with in the book. All right. Man is inclined to exaggerate almost everything except his own mistakes. When we make a mistake, we make it seem like it's just so small, it's so insignificant, not a big deal. We'll tell other people, man, don't make it look so big, more than what it usually is. You're exaggerating the situation. You're making it, but we exaggerate pretty much everything. All right, the religion of Islam recognizes that as human beings, we are fallible by nature and replete with a plethora of weaknesses. The Quran states, and the human being was created weak. Surah An-Nisa, Surah number 4, ayah 28. Allah identifies self-oppression as being the intrinsic state of every human being even before the creation of Adam. Allah said, we offered the trust of free will to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, and they all declined to bear it and feared it. But man took it man undertook it to bear it, and indeed he was unjust to himself and ignorant. So this is the natural state of every human being, is to be self-oppressive. Right? Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah, he commented on this verse by saying, the origin of every human being is to be self-oppressive by taking on responsibilities that are beyond his capacity while ignorant of the accountability that comes along with it. That's usually the human being. If Allah, by His mercy, wants good for an individual, He gives him beneficial knowledge, and with it, he is able to come out of the first state of ignorance. Allah said He is ignorant and oppressive. If Allah wants to do good for you, He'll give you knowledge, and you'll come out of the first state of ignorance with that knowledge. He said, and if He wants to further increase this blessing, He guides him to act upon that knowledge, and with it, he comes out of the second state of being oppressive to himself. However, if Allah, by His wisdom, doesn't want any good for the individual, He leaves him in his original state of being ignorant and oppressive. Considering this fact that the human being is bound to fall victim, to his or her own vices. However, Allah encourages the believer to recognize the vastness of His forgiveness by informing them that there is no sin or transgression greater than it. There is no sin or no act of disobedience that is greater than the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And due to the sensitive nature of this subject, Allah personalizes the address by saying, "O my servants." He didn't say, "O you who believe." He didn't say, "O mankind." He personalized the address. He said, "O my servants who have transgressed against their own selves by committing sin, don't despair over the mercy of Allah. Indeed, Allah forgives all sins." This divine promise of forgiveness helps to combat the whispers of shaitan, which causes despair. Abdurrahman ibn Nasr al-Sa'di mentioned in his commentary of this verse, he said, Allah will forgive every sin the individual has committed and protect him from the harvest of those sins, which manifest in the form of deficient faith, iman, and embarrassment amongst people. He will also return him to his previous state of being a God-fearing individual who does good deeds and give him success in all of his future endeavors. He will also protect him from the sin being an obstacle to any future success due to the fact that He has forgiven him for it. Therefore, when Allah forgives someone, He not only forgives the sin, but He forgives the harvest. He protects them from the harvest of the sin as well. So beautiful. SubhanAllah. Not only does Allah forgive you for the sin, He protects you from the sin being an obstacle for you later on in your life. Consequently, the Muslim that is oblivious of this, as well as the vastness of Allah's forgiveness, will ultimately become the captive of shaitan to be manipulated by him at will. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ clarified the power of Allah to alleviate the feelings of hopelessness and despair once we recognize the immensity of His forgiveness and His love for His servants. This particular type of narration is called Hadith al-Qudsi. It is the exact words of Allah conveyed to us by Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, but not in the Quran. Allah says, "O son of Adam, you don't call on me and hope for my response and my forgiveness except that I will forgive you. I will forgive any sin you have committed, and I don't mind. Wala ubali, and I don't care. O son of Adam, if your sins were to reach the clouds of the sky, and then you were to ask me for forgiveness, I would forgive you, and I don't mind. O son of Adam, if you were to come to me with the whole of the earth filled with sin, not associating partners with me, I would come to you with the like of it in forgiveness." And this was collected in the Jami' of Tirmidhi. So in many Islamic communities today, what was once viewed as a simple mistake to be covered by the entire community, giving the individual an opportunity to rectify his affairs, has now become a shameful and intolerable act to be condemned publicly on minbars. And I'm sure we are aware of that. There was a time in the Islamic community where a person can make a mistake, commit a sin, and nobody would find out about it. People would tuck it, people would hide it, people would conceal it, people would cover it. No one would know about it. I was in a particular community and a woman had a child out of wedlock. You would never even know she wasn't married. Well, I didn't know that. People would tuck that and nobody would find out about it. But then there came a time in the Islamic community where exposing people's sins became a norm. Even to the point where Islamic leadership would get on minbars and expose sins of individuals in the community. And you're saying to yourself, how in the world did we go from that to that? How did we go from a person making a mistake, you tucking it, you concealing it, giving the person the opportunity to make tawbah and fix their situation, to a person, making a mistake and the imam on the minbar on Friday, incorporates that mistake into his sermon and exposes it to the entire community, man. You know, unfortunately, many Muslims past and present have been victims of public condemnation because of mistakes that they've made, which ultimately drove them to leave what was believed to be the correct path for one that appears to be more tolerant of their errors. You have many people who, let me just be honest with you, you have many people who left Salafiyya and went to be Sufis because it seemed like that path or that approach was a little bit more tolerant, whereas the Salafi path seemed to be very rigid, very harsh, and very intolerable of sin. And of sin of a particular group of people, where there are other sins that were tucked under the prayer rug that no one ever said anything about. Nonetheless, you, normal, regular individual, you know, layperson from amongst the people, sins are exposed. I mean, even on the internet. I mean, like you got people that will say, oh, this person's dealing with magic, or this person is this, and stay away from them. This public boycott, public shame, public condemnation of a person or individual. I mean, you have pictures, people will make flyers and put a person's face on the flyer. Stay away from this person is this, and scholars have warned against this person. And it's just like, wow, how in the world did that become a trend in a community where we are encouraged to cover our faults and mistakes? That's what Islam encourages, for us to conceal our faults and mistakes. When a woman committed zina, the Prophet told her, go back. I don't even want to hear it. He was in a group of people. She walked right up and said, I committed zina. I committed adultery. The Prophet turned his face away from her. He didn't even want to hear it. She walked all the way around in front of his face and she said, I know you want to turn me away like you did with Maz, but I'm pregnant. You can't. It's staring you right in your face. You can't do anything. You have to deal with it. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it was to that point. So here we are today. We'll expose and condemn you publicly. Right? Unfortunately, many of these paths are saturated with deviant practices clothed in truth, which they don't find out about until it is too late. Some leave the religion of Islam altogether in order to avoid the constant scrutiny of those who outwardly appear to be above such errors. You have many of our Muslim youth who have had a horrible experience in a particular masjid or in a particular place. And what they do is they go and they do something even more haram and do it in a very boastful way, hoping that Muslims say something about it, right? I was on Instagram the other day, and of course had to be in Philly. There was a sister who did a rap video. I don't remember her name. And she was basically saying, you know, to Germantown Masjid to mind their business. I don't know if you guys looking at me like you don't know who I'm talking about. No? Somebody on here going to pick up on it. Somebody will point it out. Somebody will put the link to the video. Here it go, right here. But I'm just breezing through Instagram and I see it. She has on a hijab, some jeans, and she's rapping about basically mind your business. You know what I mean? Like, mind your business, stay out of my business. And, the hashtag underneath the video was Germantown, hashtag Germantown Masjid or whatever. Basically, someone who was, done dirty, someone who was treated a certain way, had a certain experience. And now this is the reaction to that, right? Sometimes our children, they don't know how to handle traumatic experience. So they react to it in a way where they make the situation even worse. They go further into their sin because they don't know how to handle, the way that they were treated as a result of the mistake that they made, So this zero tolerance policy for sin that many communities and individuals have adopted is totally antithetic, total opposite to the objective of Islamic legislation. Divine parameters, prohibitions, were designed to reduce the amount of sin that one commits and not to remove the act of sinning altogether. You understand? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislated things that are haram or whatever the case may be, that the objective was not to just totally rid Muslims of sin altogether. That's impossible. It's to reduce the amount of sin and its impact on the Muslim community as a whole. All right? And to believe that the definition of a good Muslim is one who is without sin would mean that none is actually worthy of this title because we all sin. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I'll end here. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam clarified that all human beings make mistakes, whether intentionally or unintentionally. This levels mankind with respects to mistakes and sin, while making the only distinguishing factor between them repentance. The only thing that separates me from you and you from me is not the fact that you don't sin or I don't sin. The only thing that distinguishes me from you is our tawbah. The Prophet ﷺ said, all of the children of Adam commit sin. Kullu bani Adam khatta'un. All of the children of Adam commit sin. Wa khayra khatta'ina tawwabun. And the best of those who sin are those who repent. So the only thing that distinguishes me from you is not that I sin and you don't, or you sin and I don't. The only thing that distinguishes me from you is the fact that I make tawbah and maybe you don't, or I repent from my sins and maybe you don't, or I sincerely make an intention to repent from my sins and you don't. That's it. That's the only distinguishing factor between us. All right. Some of those who are quick to shame and condemn an individual for a sin or a mistake commit some of the mistakes, but are better at concealing them. Right? You condemn me for a mistake that I made. You do the same exact thing. You just are better at hiding it. Right? You do the same exact thing. You're just better at hiding it. And the danger of this behavior is that it is dismissive of human weaknesses. It's almost like we're not allowed to be human. Right? Almost like we are not allowed to be human. We're not allowed to have weaknesses, which might be better for the individual than the righteous deeds of the other, who uses them to define him. One of the mistakes that we do as Muslims is we use our righteous deeds to define whether or not we are a good Muslim. You could actually do a good deed and have a bad intention behind it. Doing a good deed doesn't actually make you a good Muslim. It's the intention that is behind it. Ibn al-Qayyim, he said that if Allah wants good for his servant, he allows him to fall into a sin or make a mistake that will break his spirit, show him his weakness, and remove from him the disease of arrogance. And in this case, sin is better for him than many acts of obedience that may have increased him in arrogance. Think about that for a second. He said that if Allah wants good for you, he'll allow you to make a mistake. And that mistake will break your spirit, make you see yourself in a different light, right? It will cause you, shame. It will make you feel differently about yourself. Remove the disease of arrogance for your heart. And this mistake is actually better for you than actually doing something good, which would have made you more arrogant. So our job is not to punish or condemn. Our job, if we consider it as such, is to direct and redirect and constantly encourage the believers to cherish and preserve the relationship that they have with Allah. But to condemn someone for a mistake that anyone could have fallen victim to is to justify Allah testing you with what he tested him with. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever condemns his brother for a sin that he committed will not die until he commits the same mistake. Yeah. Serious, man. I've seen that play out many times in my own life. I've actually been a victim of that. I've actually condemned people for things and then turned around and did them myself. I've actually found fault. Brother come and say, yeah, I did this. And you're like, astaghfirullah, man, you need to fear Allah. And years later, you turn around and do the same exact thing. And, you know what I'm saying? Like, we just have to be honest with ourselves. The distinguishing factor between us is not that we don't make mistakes. We all make mistakes. The sole distinguishing factor between us is that I repent, work towards fixing that situation. Right? All right, so that will conclude, inshallah. I mean, we could go on and on and on. And what I would like you guys to do, for those of you who purchased the book, when you find a quote or you find a chapter, and you don't even have to quote me, but share the information with other people. Right? We have so much negative stuff on social media, so many Muslims engaging in negative stuff on social media, man. It's sad because it's such a great opportunity to spread Islam. And you have Muslims who are using it for their own, promoting their own self, their own issues, their own, acts of sin and disobedience. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us all. But, I want to be one of those who have, used social media to such a degree that we've begun to influence the world, a small quote, a small paragraph, a small chapter. I mean, even yourself, to, start your own group within your own Facebook group and, read, have readings, where you guys begin to dissect, even if it's not necessarily my words. I try to put as much Quran, Sunnah, quotes from the scholars, from the Salaf in there as much as possible. It doesn't necessarily have to be my words. I'm not promoting me. I'm promoting Islam, right? And that's what I wanted to present. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. The PayPal is imamshadidmuhammad@gmail.com. You guys have any questions or anything? I appreciate you guys coming out and sitting, listening. Alhamdulillah. This is what I do, so we could sit here all day long, but I'm not going to hold you. All right? It's already 4:30. Yes, all these books right here.
I need the Revolution of Love. I promised somebody that. Okay. I need you to sign it.
Okay.
I got to find out what names you want.
So, you guys that are online, I'm going to tune out now. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Cash. I mean, I'm not sure if she has debit.
Yeah, cash. Do you do Cash App?
Cash App? No, I actually took it off my phone. I wasn't using it, so I'm just like, it's just taking up space on my phone.
But that's the thing.
Yeah, you're actually the second person that said that to me.
That's the thing. You do that Cash App.